My name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm 28 years old, and I thought I knew everything about my family until 3 weeks ago when my mother lay dying in that sterile hospital room, clutching my hand with fingers as cold as winter morning frost. The machines beeped their mechanical rhythm around us, counting down her final moments like a twisted metronome. That's when she whispered those words that shattered everything I believed about my existence. "Sarah, there's something I should have told you years ago," she said, her voice barely audible above the hum of life support equipment. Her eyes, once vibrant blue like summer skies, had faded to the color of old denim. "About your father. About who you really are." I leaned closer, expecting maybe a confession about some affair, some secret about Dad that would explain why he'd left us when I was 12. Instead, what came next made my blood run cold and my world tilt on its axis like a broken carnival ride. "Your father didn't abandon us, sweetheart. He was taken from us. And you're not entirely human." The words hung in the air between us like smoke from a dying fire. I wanted to laugh, to dismiss it as medication-induced delirium, but something in her expression told me this was the most lucid she'd been in weeks. Her grip on my hand tightened with surprising strength. "I know it sounds impossible, but your bloodline carries something ancient, something powerful. Your father was part of a secret organization that protects people like you. People with abilities that others would fear or try to exploit." My heart hammered against my ribs. All those strange moments throughout my childhood suddenly began making sense, the way I could sense people's emotions without them saying a word, how I always knew when someone was lying, the dreams that felt more like memories of lives I'd never lived. "Mom, you're scaring me," I whispered, though part of me already knew she was telling the truth. Deep down, I'd always felt different, like I was wearing a mask that didn't quite fit properly. The other children at school seemed to move through life with an ease I never possessed. They didn't wake up in cold sweats from nightmares about places they'd never been, people they'd never met. When you were 7, you started showing signs. You predicted Mrs. Henderson's heart attack 3 days before it happened. You knew your teacher was pregnant before she did. Your father and I were terrified someone would notice, would take you away from us. I remembered Mrs. Henderson, our elderly neighbor who used to give me cookies shaped like stars. I'd told Mom I had a bad feeling about her, that something dark was hovering around her like a shadow with teeth. 3 days later, paramedics carried her out of her house on a stretcher. She never came home. "So we suppressed it," Mom continued, her breathing becoming more labored. "We found ways to dampen your abilities. The medication we told you was for your allergies, the special diet, even moving you to different schools when you got too close to discovering what you could do." The revelation hit me like ice water. Every childhood memory I'd treasured was built on lies. The loving parents who'd protected me had actually been my jailers, keeping me from understanding my own nature. The allergy medication that made me feel sluggish and disconnected, it had been designed to sever my connection to whatever supernatural heritage flowed through my veins. Why? The question came out as barely more than a breath. "Why would you do that to me?" "Because we loved you too much to let them find you. The organization your father worked for, they don't just protect people like us, they also recruit them. Once you're in, you can never leave. Your father tried to get out when he realized what they really wanted from our family." The heart monitor's beeping grew more irregular, matching the chaotic rhythm of my own pulse. I felt something awakening inside me, like a dam beginning to crack under immense pressure. Years of suppressed intuition and blocked psychic energy were fighting to break free. "What happened to Dad?" I asked, though I dreaded the answer. He discovered they weren't just interested in his abilities, they wanted yours too. Even as a child, your potential was extraordinary. They called you a generational talent, someone who comes along maybe once every 100 years. Your father threatened to expose their entire operation if they came near you. I closed my eyes, and for a moment, I could almost see him, not the distant, troubled man I remembered from my childhood, but someone desperate and fierce, fighting invisible battles to keep his daughter safe. They made it look like he abandoned us. Mom's voice was getting weaker. Staged evidence of another woman, another family. Made me believe he'd grown tired of our life, of the burden of having a daughter who was different. I was so hurt, so angry, that I helped them by cutting off all contact. I never tried to find him. The cruelty of it took my breath away. They destroyed our family not through violence, but through deception, turning love into suspicion and trust into betrayal. My father hadn't left because he didn't love us, he'd been erased because he loved us too much. Is he still alive? The question scraped against my throat like broken glass. I don't know, sweetheart. But I know he never stopped trying to find a way back to us. The letters started coming 2 years ago. My heart stopped. What letters? Hidden in places only he would think to look. Coded messages disguised as junk mail, wrong number calls that played specific songs, flowers delivered to the house with meanings only we would understand. He's been trying to tell me he's alive, that he's still fighting. I felt like I was drowning in revelations, each one pulling me deeper into a reality I wasn't prepared to accept. The woman I'd called mother my entire life had been keeping secrets that went to the very core of my existence. The abilities, they're coming back, aren't they? Mom asked, and I realized she could see it in my face. Without the suppressants, you're becoming what you were always meant to be. She was right. Over the past few months, I'd been experiencing things that defied explanation. Touching objects and suddenly knowing their history. Walking into rooms and sensing the emotional residue of conversations that had happened hours before. Dreams that felt like windows into other people's lives. "There's a man you need to find," Mom said urgently, as if she could feel time running out. "His name is Marcus Thorne. He was your father's partner, the only one who stayed loyal when everything fell apart. If anyone can help you understand what's happening, it's him." Where do I find him? The old lighthouse on Beacon Point. Every Sunday at sunset. He goes there to remember the people they couldn't save. I wanted to ask more questions, to demand explanations for a lifetime of deception, but I could see the light beginning to fade from her eyes. The machines around us were screaming now, alerting nurses who would soon flood the room with desperate attempts to fight the inevitable. "I'm sorry, Sarah. We thought we were protecting you, but maybe we were just protecting ourselves from having to watch you leave us." Her hand went limp in mine, and I felt something profound shift in the universe. The last barrier between me and my true nature crumbled away like sandcastles before an incoming tide. Energy coursed through my body, wild and untamed, carrying with it flashes of memory and knowledge that didn't belong to me. The funeral was a surreal affair attended by people who thought they knew me, who offered condolences for a loss they couldn't begin to understand. As they spoke about my mother's kindness and strength, I wanted to scream that everything they thought they knew was a carefully constructed lie. Standing beside her grave, I felt completely alone in the world for the first time. The few relatives who'd attended the service were distant cousins I barely knew, people who saw me as an obligation rather than family. They spoke in hushed tones about my future, whether I'd be able to manage the house payments, if I needed help getting back on my feet. None of them had any idea that I was discovering I could read their thoughts like newspaper headlines. Their concerns about my mother's will, their relief that they wouldn't be responsible for me, their barely concealed impatience to return to their normal lives, it all washed over me in waves of uncomfortable clarity. That night, I sat in my childhood bedroom surrounded by the artifacts of a fabricated life. Every trophy, every photograph, every memento carried the weight of deception. My allergy medication sat on the nightstand like an accusation. I picked up the bottle and hurled it against the wall, watching pills scatter across the floor like fallen stars. The change was immediate and overwhelming. Without the chemical dampeners in my system, the world exploded into a symphony of sensation I'd never experienced. I could feel the emotions of my neighbors through the walls, Mrs. Patterson's loneliness, the Martinez family's dinner conversation, the teenage boy next door's anxiety about asking someone to prom. But it was more than just emotions. I was seeing threads of connection between people, like an invisible web that showed how their lives intertwined. Some threads pulsed with love, others with resentment or fear. And spreading out from my own chest were threads I'd never noticed before, some leading to people I'd never met. Sunday couldn't come fast enough. I drove to Beacon Point as the sun began its descent toward the horizon, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. The lighthouse stood like a weathered sentinel against the darkening sky, its light long since extinguished but its presence still commanding attention from miles away. I found him exactly where Mom had said he'd be, a man in his 50s with silver-streaked hair and eyes that held too much knowledge. He was sitting on a piece of driftwood, staring out at the waves as they crashed against the rocks below. When he heard my footsteps on the gravel path, he turned toward me without surprise. "Sarah Mitchell," he said, and my maiden name sounded strange coming from a stranger's lips. "You have your father's eyes. Are you Marcus Thorne?" "I am. And I've been waiting 16 years to meet you properly." He stood up, moving with the careful precision of someone who'd learned not to trust his surroundings completely. "Your mother finally told you, didn't she?" "Some of it. Maybe not everything." I sat down on another piece of driftwood, maintaining what felt like a safe distance. "She said my father didn't really abandon us. David would have died before abandoning his family. In fact, he almost did die trying to protect you." Marcus's voice carried the weight of old grief. "We were partners for 8 years, worked dozens of cases together. I know what kind of man he was." Was? The word hit me like a physical blow. "I don't know if he's alive or dead, Sarah. The last confirmed sighting was 3 years ago in Prague. He was investigating a trafficking ring that specialized in people with abilities like yours. He went underground after that, and even I lost contact." The ocean wind whipped my hair around my face, and I tasted salt on my lips. "What exactly are these abilities? What am I?" Marcus studied my face carefully before answering. "You're what we call an empath class psychic with precognitive potential. In simpler terms, you can feel what others feel, sometimes know what they're thinking, and occasionally catch glimpses of future events." "How occasionally?" I asked, thinking about all the strange dreams and intuitions I'd dismissed over the years. "That depends on how strong your connection becomes. Some people with your abilities can see minutes into the future, others can sense major events days or even weeks before they happen." Your father could predict dangerous situations with about 70% accuracy, which made him invaluable in our line of work. What kind of work exactly? Marcus was quiet for a long moment, watching a seagull dive toward the waves. We protect people who can't protect themselves. Sometimes that means stopping someone from using psychic abilities to hurt others. Sometimes it means rescuing people who've been kidnapped because of what they can do. And sometimes, he paused, meeting my eyes, it means hunting down the monsters who prey on families like yours. I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ocean breeze. Monsters? There are people in this world who collect others with supernatural abilities the way some people collect rare books or vintage cars. They keep them locked away, force them to use their gifts for profit or entertainment. Your father and I spent years tracking down these collectors and shutting down their operations. And now they want me. They've always wanted you, Sarah. Even as a child, your psychic signature was off the charts. We have instruments that measure these things, and yours broke several of them during testing when you were 6. The revelation that I'd been tested as a child without my knowledge added another layer to my sense of betrayal. How many people had known the truth about me while I lived in ignorance? Why didn't you try to contact me after my father disappeared? Because your mother begged us not to. She was convinced that any contact with our organization would put you in danger. And she was probably right. We had reason to believe there was a mole in our ranks, someone feeding information to the collectors. Did you find the mole? Marcus's expression darkened. We found several. The corruption went deeper than we'd imagined. People your father trusted with his life were selling information to the highest bidder. When he started getting close to the truth, they had to eliminate him. But you said he might still be alive. David was always resourceful. If anyone could survive being betrayed by his own organization, it would be him. But survival and freedom are different things. He could be imprisoned somewhere, or hiding so deep underground that even I can't find him. I stood up and walked to the edge of the cliff, looking down at the churning water below. The height should have made me dizzy, but instead I felt strangely calm, as if the danger was putting my newfound abilities into sharper focus. What happens now? I asked without turning around. That depends on what you want. You could try to live a normal life, pretend none of this ever happened. With enough effort, you might be able to suppress your abilities again, go back to being Sarah the insurance adjuster who lives alone with her cat. But you don't think that's possible. I think you're past the point of no return. Your abilities are too strong now, and too many people know you exist. The collectors have been watching your mother's house for weeks, waiting to see what you'd do after she died. I spun around to face him. They've been watching me? A rotating surveillance team. Different faces, but always someone keeping tabs on your movements. They're patient, these people. They'll wait months or even years for the right opportunity to make their move. The thought of being stalked by invisible predators made my skin crawl. I realized that every choice I'd made since my mother's death had been observed and catalogued by strangers who saw me as nothing more than a commodity. So what's the alternative? You come with me. I teach you how to control your abilities, how to protect yourself. Fight back against what, exactly? Marcus reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin folder. This is what we're up against. He handed it to me, and I opened it to find photographs that made my stomach lurch. The first image showed what looked like a medical facility, but the beds were equipped with restraints and monitoring equipment that belonged in a science fiction nightmare. People lay unconscious while machines measured their brain activity, their psychic output being harvested like some kind of supernatural resource. This facility was operating for 12 years before we found it, Marcus explained. They had 43 people imprisoned there, all of them with abilities ranging from telepathy to psychokinesis. Some had been there so long they couldn't remember their real names. The second photograph showed a young girl, maybe 16, sitting in what appeared to be a glass cage. Her eyes were vacant, staring at nothing, and her hair had grown long and tangled from years of captivity. This is Rebecca Santos. She was taken from her family when she was 8 because she could move objects with her mind. By the time we rescued her, she'd been forced to use her abilities to steal for her captors for so many years that she couldn't distinguish between her own will and their commands. I closed the folder, unable to look at any more images. How many of these places are there? We've shut down 17 facilities in the past 5 years, but new ones keep opening. It's like fighting a hydra, cut off one head and 2 more appear. The magnitude of what he was describing overwhelmed me. I'd spent my entire adult life processing insurance claims, dealing with car accidents and house fires, problems that had clear solutions and reasonable timelines. This was something else entirely, a shadow war being fought in the spaces between normal life. If I agree to help you, what exactly would I be signing up for? Training, first. You need to learn how to control your abilities before they control you. Then fieldwork, gradually working your way up to more dangerous assignments. And if I don't want to be a warrior in this shadow war? Marcus's expression softened. Then I'll do everything I can to help you disappear. New identity, new location, whatever it takes to keep you safe. But I won't lie to you, running is just postponing the inevitable. These people are persistent, and they have resources we can't match. I walked back to the driftwood and sat down, trying to process everything he'd told me. The weight of choice pressed down on my shoulders like a physical burden. Either path led away from the comfortable lie I'd been living, but one offered the possibility of fighting back while the other offered only the hope of hiding. "Can I ask you something personal?" I said. "Of course. How did you get involved in all this?" Marcus smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. My sister was taken when she was 14. She could see glimpses of the future, usually about people she cared about. One day she saw her parents dying in a car accident and tried to warn them. Instead of listening to her, they had her committed to a psychiatric facility. That's horrible. The facility was a front. They were experimenting on children with psychic abilities, trying to enhance their powers through drugs and psychological manipulation. By the time I tracked her down 2 years later, she'd been broken beyond repair. She died in my arms, apologizing for not being able to see her own future clearly enough to escape. "I'm so sorry. Your father helped me rescue her. We were both rookies then, barely knew what we were doing. But David refused to give up, even when our superiors wanted to write her off as collateral damage. That's the kind of man he was, someone who would move heaven and earth to save one innocent person. I felt a connection forming between us, built on shared loss and the recognition of someone else who'd had their world turned upside down by forces beyond their control. If I agree to this, will you help me find my father?" "Finding David is already my top priority," Marcus replied. "But I have to warn you, if he's alive, he might not be the same man you remember. Years of hiding, of fighting, of never knowing who to trust. it changes people. He's been gone for 16 years. I've already accepted that he's not the father I lost. Then you understand what you're getting into better than most recruits do. I stood up and extended my hand toward him. When do we start? Marcus shook my hand firmly. Right now. We can't go back to your house, they're watching it too closely. Everything you need for the next few weeks is in my car. You were that confident I'd say yes? I was that hopeful. Hope is sometimes all we have in this business. We walked back toward the parking area where a nondescript sedan waited. As Marcus opened the trunk, I caught a glimpse of surveillance equipment, weapons, and what looked like enough supplies for an extended camping trip. Where are we going? A safe house about 3 hours north of here. It's isolated enough that you can practice using your abilities without worrying about who might sense them. As we drove away from Beacon Point, I watched the lighthouse disappear in the side mirror and realized I was leaving behind not just a location, but an entire version of myself. Sarah Mitchell, the insurance adjuster, was gone forever. In her place was someone I didn't know yet, someone with a dangerous inheritance and an uncertain future. Marcus, can I ask you something else? Anything. Do you think my mother was right to suppress my abilities for so long? He was quiet for several miles before answering. I think she was a mother who loved her daughter and made the best decision she could with the information she had. Whether it was right or wrong, that's not for me to judge. The safe house turned out to be a renovated farmhouse nestled in a valley between two hills, surrounded by fields that stretched to the horizon in every direction. It looked peaceful, almost pastoral, but I noticed the subtle signs of serious security: cameras disguised as birdhouses, motion sensors hidden among the fence posts, and windows made of what appeared to be bulletproof glass. How many people know about this place? I asked as Marcus led me inside. 3, including us. The owner is a retired operative who maintains several properties like this one. She asks no questions and keeps no records. The interior was comfortable but functional, with furniture that had been chosen for durability rather than style. A wall of monitors in what should have been a living room displayed feeds from various security cameras around the property. Your room is upstairs, second door on the right. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you, and basic supplies in the bathroom. How do you know my size? We've been keeping loose tabs on you for years, even after your mother asked us to stay away. Not invasive surveillance, just enough to make sure you were safe. I felt another wave of the betrayal I'd been carrying since my mother's deathbed confession. How many people had been watching me, measuring me, making decisions about my life while I lived in ignorance? I know you're angry, Marcus said, apparently reading my expression. You have every right to be. But try to remember that everyone who kept secrets from you did it because they cared about what happened to you. That doesn't make it right. No, it doesn't. But it's the reality we're working with. That night, I lay in an unfamiliar bed staring at an unfamiliar ceiling, trying to reconcile everything I thought I knew about my life with the truth I was still discovering. The abilities my mother had worked so hard to suppress were growing stronger by the hour, and I could feel the emotions of Marcus downstairs as he sat guard by the monitors. Training began the next morning. Marcus started with meditation exercises designed to help me focus and control the flow of psychic information that had been overwhelming me since I'd stopped taking the suppressants. Think of your mind as a radio, he explained as we sat cross-legged in the middle of an empty field. Right now, you're picking up every station at once. We need to teach you how to tune into specific frequencies and filter out the noise. It was harder than it sounded. Every time I tried to focus on my own thoughts, I'd catch fragments of Marcus's mental state or sense the simple consciousness of insects in the grass around us. The world had become a cacophony of sensation and emotion that threatened to drive me insane if I couldn't learn to control it. My father did this too. David was a natural. He could separate his own emotions from those he was sensing within a few weeks of training. But everyone's different. Some people take months to develop that kind of control. How long do we have? As long as it takes. The collectors won't make their move while they think you're with me. They're cautious about engaging active operatives directly. Over the following days, I slowly began to understand the scope of my abilities. I could not only sense emotions and surface thoughts, but also pick up on the psychic residue left behind by intense experiences. When Marcus showed me a knife that had been used in a murder, I instantly knew the killer had been motivated by jealousy rather than greed. That's psychometry, he explained. The ability to read the history of objects through physical contact. It's one of the rarer gifts, and extremely useful in our line of work. What else can I do? We're still finding out. Your abilities seem to be evolving rapidly, which is unusual. Most psychics stabilize within a few months of their first manifestation. Is that good or bad? I honestly don't know. 2 weeks into my training, Marcus received a call that changed everything. I was practicing remote viewing in the barn when I heard him shouting my name from the house. I ran back to find him standing by the monitors with an expression I'd never seen before, equal parts hope and terror. What is it? That was Elena, our contact in Eastern Europe. She thinks she's found your father. My heart stopped. Where? A private medical facility in Romania. It's disguised as a treatment center for rare neurological conditions, but our intelligence suggests it's actually a research facility specializing in psychic enhancement and control. Enhancement? They take people with natural abilities and try to amplify them through drugs, surgery, and psychological conditioning. The goal is to create psychic weapons that can be controlled remotely. The implications hit me like ice water. They're trying to turn my father into a weapon? If it's really him, yes. But Sarah, you have to understand, after 16 years of captivity, of forced conditioning and medical experimentation, he might not be the same person anymore. He might not even remember you. I felt something cold and determined settle in my chest. I don't care. He's my father, and I'm not leaving him there. We can't just storm in there. This facility is heavily guarded, and they'll kill their prisoners before allowing them to be rescued. We need a plan. Then let's make one. Marcus studied my face for a long moment. You're not ready for this kind of mission. You've had 2 weeks of training, not 2 years. I'm ready enough. And besides, you said my abilities are still evolving. Maybe I have something they won't be expecting. Or maybe you'll get yourself killed and doom any chance of rescuing your father. I walked to the window and looked out at the peaceful fields surrounding the farmhouse. Somewhere in a facility halfway around the world, the man who'd sacrificed everything to protect me was being tortured and broken by people who saw him as nothing more than a test subject. Marcus, I'm going to Romania with or without your help. The only question is whether you're coming with me. Marcus spent the next 3 days trying to talk me out of going to Romania, but I could feel his resolve weakening. Finally, He admitted that he'd been planning a rescue mission for months, waiting for the right opportunity and enough intelligence to make it feasible. The facility is called the Carpathian Institute, he explained, spreading blueprints across the kitchen table. It's built into a mountainside, with most of the important areas underground. They have about 30 patients at any given time, along with a staff of doctors, researchers, and security personnel. How do we know my father is really there? Elena managed to hack into their patient database. The records show a John Doe admitted 16 years ago with severe memory loss and unusual neurological activity. The timing matches your father's disappearance, and the psychic signature readings are consistent with what we know about his abilities. I studied the blueprints, trying to memorize the layout of corridors and rooms that might determine whether I lived or died. The facility looked like a maze designed by someone who wanted to ensure that no one could find their way out without help. What's the plan? Elena has been working there as a night shift nurse for 6 months. She can get us inside during a shift change when security is temporarily reduced. From there, we locate your father and extract him through a service tunnel that leads to an old mining shaft. What about the other patients? Marcus paused. We can't save them all, Sarah. This is a surgical strike, not a liberation mission. But we're just going to leave innocent people to be tortured? If we try to evacuate everyone, we'll never make it out alive. Sometimes you have to choose between saving some people and saving no one. The moral complexity of what we were planning weighed on me like a physical burden. I understood Marcus's logic, but the thought of walking past other prisoners, other people whose families were probably still wondering what had happened to them, made me feel sick. How do we know the others won't raise an alarm when they realize we're there? Most of the long-term patients are heavily sedated. The facility keeps them in a semi-conscious state to prevent them from using their abilities to escape or communicate with the outside world. We flew to Romania 3 days later, traveling under false identities that Marcus had acquired through channels he didn't explain. As our plane descended toward Bucharest, I felt my abilities responding to the psychic atmosphere of a different country, picking up emotional undercurrents that felt older and more complex than anything I'd experienced in America. The Carpathian Mountains have a long history of supernatural activity, Marcus explained as we drove toward the facility. Some people think the geological structure amplifies psychic energy. Others believe it's just the cultural memory of centuries of folklore and superstition. Elena met us at a small inn about 10 miles from the institute. She was a compact woman in her 40s with intelligent eyes and hands that moved constantly as she talked, mapping out details of the facility's security procedures and shift rotations. Your father is in Wing C, room 47, she told me. He's listed as being in a permanent vegetative state, but I've observed signs of awareness that the doctors either don't notice or choose to ignore. What kind of signs? His vital signs change when certain staff members enter his room. His brain activity spikes during specific times of day. And sometimes, when I'm checking on other patients nearby, I feel like someone is watching me. The possibility that my father was conscious but trapped in his own body added a new dimension of horror to his situation. For 16 years, he'd been aware of his captivity but unable to escape or communicate with anyone who might help him. That night, as we prepared for the rescue mission, I felt the full weight of everything that had led